Have you ever prepped anyone for competition?
Yeah, plus
Yeah.
myself.
Or have you? So when you prep for competition, did you notice that your face changed? Like the muscles in your face were like a bit saggy, for
Well,
want of a better word.
your face is usually the first one to go away, but also even just your blinking slows down. Everything slows down.
Yeah.
Even like something else that I figured out through comp prep is that your body extracts more calories from food as well. Like it does everything it possibly can to get every single calorie from food. So even like low calorie foods like artificial sweeteners and all that kind of crap, your body will take a lot more calories from those artificial sweeteners
Yeah.
and also from fiber. And part of the mitochondria thing that you were mentioning there as well, with your mitochondria becoming more efficient as you diet, is that part of you extract more calories from food, but also with every movement, with your training, you burn less calories through that because your body wants to become a lot more efficient at
Yeah.
everything it does. So it will find faster pathways to do so. Now,
Yeah.
there was a part in there. Actually, I'll touch on that part
Okay.
in a second.
Uh,
I
yeah.
just
I'll
wanted
just I'll
to,
just finish I'll just finish that thought
yes,
if that's right. So yeah, that efficiency happens as well. And so all of that would happen while you're dieting. There's no reason to assume that your body would continue to do that to the same degree when you're not dieting anymore. So those 15 and 18% figures are like the big headline figures, but in broadly the rest of the research, and I'm not going to name all of the trials, but the calorie trial and all of the other trials, when the participants are measured after the dieting phase, in some trials, it's found that there's no adaptation anymore at all. And in some trials, it's found that there is some adaptation still. So, in the Biggest Loser trial, for instance, there was still metabolic adaptation a year down the line, even when people weren't dieting anymore. But it was way lower than 18%. So the top down figure, like the what is metabolic adaptation, to finish that off, metabolic adaptation is the phenomenon that's seen in most research that involves fat loss, where during a diet, especially as you get very, very lean, your body becomes more efficient. So you burn fewer calories on a day to day basis. The highest amount of adaptation that's ever been discovered was 18%. And that 18% was discovered in horrendous dieting practices that involved massively excessive amounts of cardio and crash dieting in people with obesity. And the 18% figure was measured during the diet. Now, remember, that's 18% of basal metabolic rate. Most people's basal metabolic rate is going to be it's going to be less than 2,000 calories, almost always. So, an 18% drop on 2,000 calories is going to be 400 calories. So this is not like your body is burning 1,000 calories a day. It means that if you had a 2,000 calorie basal metabolic rate, which you would have if you were like 95 kilos or something, that's a big basal metabolic rate, um, you'd burn 1,600 calories at rest instead of 2,000, and then you've got all of your exercise calories on top of that. So you could still feasibly be burning 3,000 calories a day, and that's measured during the diet. So when you're not dieting anymore, that figure seems to reduce. In some people, it reduces to zero. In some people, it doesn't. And so the top down is metabolic adaptation happens when you diet. There's not a lot you can do about it. It just happens in some people and it doesn't happen in other people. Um, in research on bariatric operation patients, it happens. On research on bariatric patients, it doesn't happen. People who diet well, it happens. People who diet well, it doesn't happen. It seems to be a bit of a crapshoot, and it's not really understood what leads to adaptation and what doesn't. So people who say go into a small calorie deficit to avoid adaptation are guessing. Similarly, when you finish the diet, it usually goes away, at least to a significant degree. And so the top down is metabolic adaptation does happen, but it will not prevent fat loss. It will not lead to weight gain. It might just slightly reduce your calorie expenditure. And that might need some consideration, but it's not going to prevent you from achieving your goals. And so, if you are gaining weight that you don't want to gain, or if you're not losing weight that you want to lose, the problem is not the adaptation, it's something else.
I just really want to interject something you said before about all
Go
your
for it. Go
exercise
for it. I've
calories
monologued
on top of
for
it.
4 hours now, so go for it.
I I wrote down quite a few just so I can take my own monologue next and provide some context and some added stuff that you did not touch on. But I do have to say, when Tom mentioned the exercise calories on top, he did not mean your exercise calories because you burn so very little when you exercise, like so very
No,
little.
you're right.
He meant
Activity calories. Sorry.
activity calories is what he was talking about. I just needed to clarify that because you're not going to out exercise any of this, as one
Great.
big factor in everything that Tom said is that if you diet the wrong way, that is when issues happen, but also because of the hormonal bullshit that you conquer up, and also the fact that you lost muscle mass, which is
like, not really. That can happen, but not for metabolic adaptation reasons. Like, if you diet in the wrong way, things can go to shit, but not because you adapt more. It's because of all of the other stuff.
That's what I'm
diet
bring up in a second. Yeah. That's what I'm going to bring up in a second. So one thing that Tom mentioned at the very start, which is you'll be maintaining your body on 1,400 calories if that's the end of your diet, 1,500 calories if that's the end of your diet. Yeah, that's your new maintenance, but that's the thing. It's a suppressed maintenance. It's not your real maintenance. The reason that is your maintenance there is because of all the adaptations that previously happened. And this is where people kind of get held up and all kinds of fears, because they're like, well, I maintain my body weight on this. I'm not losing anything. I'm not gaining anything. Yeah, but as soon as you start feeding your body up, your body is going to upregulate. Your hormones are going to upregulate. One of the main factors of metabolic adaptation is leptin. Leptin is the hormone that starts, well, as soon as you diet, leptin will drop by about 10% within that, and your basal metabolic rate will drop about 10% with that. But the thing is, the reason that your metabolic rate drops when you diet is for those very things, but there's also a drop in the food that you're eating. So the calories you burn while you eat goes down. You're probably not going to be training as hard or as intensely if that's also the case. That will drop down. If you move less, you're going to be blinking less. Like, NEAT is not something you can control. I hate saying steps are NEAT, because NEAT is more like blinking, fidgeting, things that you cannot control. And you can't just become a fidgeter overnight. Like, you can't just make yourself fidget. That's like in your genes. You're either a fidgeter or you're not a fidgeter. It's like, try to fidget more today. Like
I've got 3 cans of Monster in the fridge that disagree.
Yeah, but it's just like the effect that fidgeting will actually add to the whole equation is very minimal. If you just get more steps, you'll get more out of that. But another reason that metabolic rate drops is because you're losing weight. There is less of you moving around. And if you lose muscle mass, then you're going to have less metabolically adaptive tissue. But then, because of the unsustainable practices, which is what Tom was just alluding to then, you are more likely to gain fat back over muscle. Fat is a third of the metabolic burn of muscle. Muscle is 3 times more metabolically active than fat. So if you're losing muscle and then replacing that with fat, which if you add more fat cells to your body, you cannot delete them. You can't control or delete that shit. You can shrink them, but you can't delete them. So you are increasing your body fat set point. And that's usually where this whole thing comes in, because people take unsustainable practices, then gain more fat back. And this is where yo-yoing, quote unquote, fucks up your metabolism. Because if you keep adding back new fat cells, that, like, any fat cells that you add increases your hunger drive, your drive to eat, because that's what it does. But here's another thing to keep in mind. I already mentioned how a deficit can affect your metabolic rate, but there's also at the same point, your sex hormones get impacted. Your thyroid gets impacted. Your hunger levels, your, like, lettuce with stevia tastes like the most delicious snack in the world when you're dieting. Freaking celery tastes like it's crack cocaine when you're dieting. Like, everything just becomes tastier when you are in a depleted state, meaning you're going to have heightened smell, like you just have an increased drive to eat. So all of these adaptations are why taking diet breaks and spending more time away from fat loss and not rushing it is the key, because this is where people, like, that is where people get stuck and why they feel like everything sticks to them and the metabolism gets fucked up, because once they reach the end of the diet, they don't realize that you're actually meant to eat more, or you're not meant to live in a diet forever, and you're meant to take breaks away from it. Now, muscles role in this, like I just said, can influence your set point. And that's where that whole thing comes. Now, there's also the topic of metabolic phenotypes, where if you as someone who can, I guess, you lose weight really quickly because you don't adapt as hard. There's that. I think that's a thrifty metabolism, because you can pretty much lose weight without that much effort, quote unquote. But then there are those that adapt really damn hard, and I'm kind of one of those people, but I also adapt really hard the opposite direction, so I can eat a lot more as well. But when I go into a diet, my performance starts to plummet straight away. And like my body just, like, I need to be able to keep myself moving. But as soon as I'm not dieting anymore, I can thrive and maintain on high calories. But if I need to lose weight, then there is a lot of effort that needs to go into keeping my activity levels high. And that's kind of where people can feel like, okay, well, everything just sticks to me, because by the same token, there are some people that are just more predisposed to gaining weight faster. But at the same time, if you try to diet, you can lose weight just as fast. It's just that you're more predisposed to, because you're one of those spendthrift metabolisms in that, okay, cool, you know what I'm trying to say. So we talked about how crash diets can lead to severe metabolic. You look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, on the spendthrift and wasteful metabolism thing. Have you ever worked with a client who's changed job to like one that's got significantly different conditions?
This is a good one. Yeah. I have two.
Because I don't personally believe that that's a thing. So I'm someone who largely struggles to gain weight. So weight gain's always been really difficult for me. A lot of people hear that and go, "Oh, it must be terrible to have to eat loads of food. Oh, isn't it a terrible problem?" But it is. It's annoying. It's boring. Like the only people who think it's fun to eat 4,000 calories a day are people who don't eat 4,000 calories a day. It's a shit time. It's fun for about a week, and then it's just boring. But anyway, I train 4 times a week, which is not a lot, but I probably do about 20,000 steps a day. And the reason I do that is because I've got a working Springer Spaniel that I need to take care of. He does a lot of walking every day. And so I struggle to gain weight, yeah, but I'm also really, really active. And whenever I've ever spoken to a client who is like, "Oh, that's me," like, "Oh, I only have to look at a cake and it'll put weight on," and I only like I try really hard to lose weight and then it only takes one weekend to put it back on. These are people who are not active, and it's not through any fault of their own. These are usually parents. So they'll wake up in the like I tend to work with women, so it's usually mums who take like the bulk of the housework and the bulk of the childcare. So it's like they'll get up in the morning, they'll have a coffee, they'll get the kids ready for school, they'll get the kids to school, so they've got no time to do any activity in the morning realistically. Then they'll go to work, they'll drive to work, they'll sit in an office for 8 hours a day, then they'll drive home. They'll pick the kids up from wherever the kids are. They'll bring the kids home. They'll make the kids evening meal. Then they'll go to the gym, and then they'll come back, and then you have to get ready for the next day, and then it's time to go to bed. And it's like in that day, you might have done 2,000 steps, and you're training 3 times a week because you don't have a lot of time to do anything else, and you can be a little bit active on the weekend, but there's only so much activity you can do in 2 days. And it's like, do you have a slow metabolism, or do you just not move? And then if you combine that with, and this is something that you touched on briefly earlier, Ruby, when you were talking about like, for some people, like 1,500 calories is maintenance. Like, if you're a woman, and unfortunately this is something that affects women way more than men, if you're a woman and you're like 5'2" and you're like 130 pounds body weight, like you are not going to have a lot of calories to play with regardless of what you do. But if you combine that with inactivity, like your maintenance will be tiny and you just get no wiggle room. So again, for someone like me, like if I'm not walking the dog as much, I'll maintain my weight on 3,400 calories.
This is exactly why creating a lifestyle out of this and having more movement in your life, this is why you need to take the right approach. Because if you don't create a lifestyle around movement, then everything is going to be so much harder for you, which is why I actually touched on what I touched on, because the reason, like, I adapt really freaking hard, like I said, on the way down, because there is such a thing, and Brandon DeCruz spoke on it many times in his podcast as well. But the thing is, you can mitigate that by being actively aware of what you're doing, which is what I was going to touch on. Like, the reason why I can, like, my performance drops, yes, but I still make sure I get my steps. I still make sure that I'm on top of all my movement so that I don't have to eat freaking shit calories in order to see results. But then again, I haven't been in a fat loss phase for freaking years. But this is the thing, like, the last time I went on one, my coach didn't even think that I was going to drop that fast. Like, I lost 4 kilos in 1 month, and he did not expect that. He was thinking I'd be like 2 kilos down, but no, my body just lost it like that. And that's because I was outside of a fat loss phase for over 3 years before that diet. And it's been 3 years since I did that. I think that was in like 2020 that I did that one. So that, like, this is the thing. You create the lifestyle, you build up the habits, you create more muscle mass in that as well. And your performance, if you start to lift heavier weights, you can lift more volume. And while it is not like, your goal behind training is not to burn more calories, you do burn more calories by doing that. And then you burn more calories after that, because now you have to repair that muscle. But something I really wanted to also touch on within that is the people think that refeeding, as an example, boosts your metabolism while you're in a fat loss phase, but it doesn't really all that much at all. Like, it gives you a psychological break for that one day, but then there are some people where that can trigger a downward spiral, because now they crave more highly palatable foods. I actually forgot where I was going to go with that because I got distracted, but I just wanted to interject and say that. Damn it, I had a really good point. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry. Okay, so when I have a reel on this that I was meant to put out, because I did research and all that kind of stuff on females and female studies that have tested this very thing. And once I find the reel, I'm going to put it up, because I did a lot of research on that. But they found that the metabolism slowed down by the end of the diet. And then they tested them like a week or two after, and it was still slowed down. But that's the thing, because leptin takes 2 weeks in order for it to then get increased again. And that usually is one of the, it's like the thing that holds the rope to your metabolic rate. But also, they lost body weight. And when you lose body weight, your metabolism drops with that, because your overall mass has fallen. Then one of the studies, they followed it up. I think it was a year later, 12 months later, and their metabolisms adjusted for their body weight was the exact same again. And that's the thing. It just takes time to then build back up, which is why people usually say you need to eat more food and be out of a diet for the same time that you've been in the diet.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, that's found in some research, but then if you look at The Biggest Loser, their metabolic rate never came back. Like, their metabolic rate stayed suppressed.
A lot of
and
weight.
so from like a practical perspective, I don't even think like, will your metabolism slow down is like a useful question for people to spend a lot of time thinking about, because the answer is maybe. And then the answer to the question, is there anything I can do to avoid that, is no. Don't lose weight would be the answer to that question. And so from a practical perspective, what we need to ask ourselves is not, will my metabolism slow down or anything? It's like, well, what do people who lose weight successfully do? And what do people do who lose weight and successfully keep it off? And the broad answer to the second question is they maintain higher activity levels. And if you can maintain higher activity levels, so not just do loads of cardio to lose weight and then go back to what you were doing, but as Ruby says, like, make activity and make exercise part of a lifestyle, even if your metabolic rate adapts a bit, it'll still be high enough for you to get by. And And as I say, you need to set realistic expectations. If you are a small person and you're going to get quite light, you will not have the wiggle room someone like me has. I can go to Starbucks and get a caramel latte at 600 calories, and that will not affect my day in the slightest because that is a very small percentage of my total intake. That could feasibly be a third of a moderately active woman's requirement if she's quite small. And so you need to set realistic expectations and try to get your head around the kinds of foods that need to predominate within your diet. But as Ruby said, if you can make daily activity part of your lifestyle outside of exercise, that will increase your daily energy expenditure to the point that any adaptation becomes almost a moot point. And if you're finding that you're gaining weight that you don't want to gain, or you're not losing weight that you want to lose, look away from adaptation as the cause. Look to, do you have lower activity levels than you're expecting? Look to, are you actually gaining weight, or do you just have a distended stomach because you ate a meal and there's food in there now? Are you actually gaining weight, or have you gained a bit of water weight because you're stressed about the fact that you're panicking about gaining weight? Or are you eating in a way that's unsustainable, that's leading you to have additional snacks, or to have like evenings where you eat way more food? Or are you choosing foods that are really calorie dense and you're not accounting for that? Because 100 times out of 100, I was going to say 99 times out of 100, but that's not even true. 100 times out of 100, when I've had a client who's lost weight and then is regaining weight they don't want to regain, and they're worried about metabolic adaptation or whatever, when we dig deep into it, the problem has been that they're not sticking to the dietary approach that they would need to stick to in order to maintain that weight. And that's when we can have that very difficult discussion of, is maintaining this weight worth the sacrifice that's required? And the answer to that's going to, of course, vary client to client.
I think people miss out on the fact that a lot of, like, you want to make this a lifestyle that allows you to still live your life and thrive and not suffer through and have your whole life revolve around what you're eating, what you're training, the exercise you're doing, calorie counting, calorie burning, because what life is that? And just like Tom said in our last episode, which I freaking loved, is, are you going to spend the rest of your life scared to lose all of your progress? Because what life is that, living in fear of losing any progress? Like, that is the point of taking the right approach. You create a lifestyle and an identity around it, and you create the unwavering belief that you have it within your control to do whatever it takes. And I feel like people who stress out about these things and who stress out about the possibility of gaining fat with their muscle or gaining too much or whatever the fuck happens after a diet, they do not fundamentally believe that they can lose the weight again. They do not fundamentally believe that they can control their habits to go back into a diet, because their diet, the time they remember dieting, was so painfully stressful and sacrificing that the thought of trying to diet again just does not appeal to you, or the fact that you're not taking enough time away from fat loss. If you took the right approach and realized that fat loss is such a small portion of this whole equation, and that there is so much to your life and so much to everything than just your body, then it becomes a lot more manageable. And I'm not going to lie, I'm going to say this right now, I'm not going to lie that it isn't, like, it hasn't troubled me as one thought in my mind as well. But the thing is, I need to get realistic and fact check my facts, because I do have a history of disordered eating and I do have a history of body image issues. I don't have that now, but I still need to make sure that I'm not going back into that place, because I've come so far already. And all I can think about, but this is the thing, what led to me now, because it wasn't until I lost 3 kilos of muscle, I lost 100 kilos worth of deadlift strength, plus some, whatever the hell. Like, it wasn't until I lost all of that I realized the value in where I was and what I had. You don't realize until it's gone. And it was that moment post-COVID where I realized that all I want to do is be able to just build my muscle already. But it doesn't come without the fear or without the uncomfortability of, hey, this is going to come with some discomfort of you getting bigger. The scale's going to go up. Your pants are going to feel tighter. You're going to feel watery. You're going to feel like fat's coming on too, because you do not just gain muscle by itself, and you are not freaking made of wood. Like, muscle itself jiggles when it's relaxed. The only time muscle is hard is when you're flexing it. So I feel like that is a really important part to end this podcast with, because damn it, women, we are so freaking hard on ourselves. The amount of posts I see, clients, everything, of people just wanting to look like the next top supermodel on Instagram. which is like it's not even skin and bones on TV anymore. It's lean, unsustainable body shapes, or someone who's got a BBL, or someone who genetically has a waist the size of my pinky, while their hips are nice and wide, which gives them a big booty illusion. Like, you are not going to change that structure either. We have to, as Tom just mentioned, what is within your control? Because you can damn well become the best version of yourself. You can figure out what parts of them that you like. What is it that you like about that body? Okay, it's the booty. Okay, it's the quads. Except that your process is not going to look the same as theirs. There are people at the gym, I'm not going to lie, I'm friends with two of them, and I'm just like, dude, seriously? The fact that you don't even train your ass and you have an ass the size of freaking Nicki Minaj, like, it's just within her genes. She has struggles building other parts of her body. Her butt is just freaking extra large.
Is she
Whereas
also 4'9"? Because that's usually the case.
she's my height, but the thing is, she has a waist this small, and her butt is just, it stores most of her fat. So we need to get realistic with where our bodies are and how we can change them with what we have, because we cannot change the cards we are dealt with. We can only play them the best we've got. Why do I always get it better than I rambled through the middle of it itself? That's your dessert. The main meal was boring. I'm sorry.
Sure, you feel better, right? I'll finish off because I desperately need to go. Right, there's this thing where people will look at a really in shape person or whatever, and a really common phrase to hear in the fitness space is "you just don't want it enough," and I honestly think that that phrase should be looked at completely different to how it is. When someone says you don't want it enough, that's usually taken on as like this knock to your dedication or something like that. Whereas this is the way I would prefer people to think of it, okay? I've been really lean. I've had a six pack. I know lots of people who have had six packs. And I will tell you straight, without any hesitation, that it's fucking miserable. Okay? If you want to have a six pack and if you want to be really, really lean, what that will require in every circumstance is either drugs, incredible genetics, those two are kind of interchangeable, or a massive sacrifice. If you want to have a six pack, if you want to have that really lean body, the kind of one that you will see on Instagram, that is going to necessitate training 4 or 5 times a week. It's going to necessitate large amounts of cardio. It will necessitate radical amounts of dietary restriction. So you'll be prepping all of your meals. You will be the dickhead that is taking Tupperware with them all the time. You will be the person that's asking in a restaurant if you can have a salad instead of chips. You will be the person saying no to drink and alcohol, and you will have to do that every time. Your friends are having a takeaway, you're bringing Tupperware with you. That is what is going to be necessitated if you want to be that lean. And the truth of the matter is that it's shit. It is not worth it. And if someone tells you, "Oh, you could have a six pack, you just don't want it enough," you should wear that as a part, as a badge of pride. Because the reason you don't want it enough is because you probably have other priorities. I am not as lean as I could be because I enjoy eating tasty food with my wife. I enjoy going on holiday and not training while I'm there. I train really hard, but I'm not going to train 5, 6 times a week. I have other hobbies. I have other things to do. And I honestly recommend that what most people need to do when it comes to nutrition and exercise is not to think of this really lean goal weight and work as hard as they possibly can to get there. What they need to do instead is work out an amount of exercise, an amount of nutritional management that's going to fit in with their life, and then just do that. And the results will be that you'll get pretty lean, you'll get pretty muscular, you'll get way healthier, your heart health will be better, your cardiovascular health will be better, and then you can spend all of that additional cognitive energy on other shit that's actually enjoyable. Because if you can do it that way, exercise becomes way easier to maintain and you'll be happy with the results rather than just getting there and thinking, what now? I've got to maintain this for the rest of my life. When you can't.
I love that.
And that's it. That's my piece.
I guess we really ended with a chocolate brownie. Sorry the main wasn't as good as our dessert, but I hope you enjoyed that podcast. If there's anything else that you want to hear about, let me know. I have an amazing 2 podcasts coming up. One is on everything to do with the hard truths around fat loss and things that other trainers don't tell you and other coaches won't tell you. And the other one is on self-sabotage and mindset things that keep you stuck. So stay tuned in, let us know. And if there's anything else you want Tom and I to ramble on about, let me know, and you will hear us on the next anti-wellness wankery episode. Bye-bye.